My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 45 years old. For over 16 years, I built a life with a woman I truly believed was my future. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud, but I was consistent. I built a small architectural firm from the ground up, worked long hours, paid the mortgage early, and made sure she never had to worry about a thing. We didn't have kids, but we had routines, quiet dinners, weekend hikes, shared playlists on long drives, or at least I thought we did. The shift was slow, like a draft through a closed window. She started saying his name more. Elliot this, Elliot that. Her new boss. I didn't think much of it at first. I knew he ran a large construction firm, a flashy corporate guy with too much cologne and a habit of interrupting people. She admired him. He's sharp, she'd say. He believes in me. I used to believe in her too. Until one night, I came home early and saw her sitting in our kitchen, wine glass half full, talking to him on speakerphone with a voice that used to be reserved for me. She didn't flinch when she saw me, didn't pause. She just kept laughing at something he said, then slowly muted the call and looked up like I was a guest who had walked into the wrong house. I didn't make a scene. I walked to the sink, poured myself water, and went upstairs. That night, she didn't come to bed. And for the first time in 16 years, the silence between us didn't feel like peace. It felt like a decision had already been made. 2 weeks later, she sat me down on the couch. "I think we've grown apart," she said. The kind of phrase people rehearse when they've already packed their emotional bags. I asked her one question. "Is there someone else?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I could see it in the way she avoided my eyes and in how cleanly rehearsed her words were. "You'll land on your feet," she said, as if I'd tripped over my own life and needed help standing up. She moved out the following weekend. I helped her load her car, not because I was weak, but because I wanted her to remember that I was calm. I wanted her to remember my silence. Because silence, when wielded by the right man, is not surrender. It's preparation. She thought she'd traded up. She thought I was the past. What she didn't know was that everything she admired in her boss was built on blueprints I had quietly drawn years ago, and when I finally made my move, it would be the kind of shift she'd feel in every room she walked into. After she left, I didn't touch anything in the house. Her coffee mug still sat by the sink. Her favorite sweater hung over the back of the dining chair. I didn't move them, not because I couldn't, but because I wanted to see how long it would take for the ghost of her to fade. The silence in the house wasn't empty, it was honest. It was the first time in years I could hear myself think without walking on eggshells. I started to replay conversations we had, little moments I once dismissed. The way she'd ask about my schedule, not with curiosity but calculation. The way she always seemed irritated on the days I came home early. I remembered birthdays she forgot, and how often she forgot her phone face down on the table when she was texting. Looking back, it wasn't a surprise. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Loyalty doesn't vanish overnight. It dissolves in small, dismissive choices. I didn't tell anyone about the breakup right away. Not my brother, not my coworkers, not even my best friend David, who had always been suspicious of her subtle superiority complex. I wasn't ready for the pity looks. I wasn't ready for the "you deserve better" speeches. I needed to stay in control, not of them, but of myself, and that meant thinking, not reacting. I did, however, start paying attention. Quietly. I visited Elliot's company website. I looked through public records. I dug into the projects he boasted about, because something wasn't sitting right. It wasn't just that she left me for her boss. It was that he was flaunting contracts I had helped secure years ago, under a different firm name. Projects that used design specs I recognized. My specs, slightly altered, yes, but not enough to hide their origin from the man who had created them. That was the first time I realized this wasn't just personal, it was professional. My wife hadn't just replaced me emotionally, she'd handed parts of my intellectual work to a man who saw it as an opportunity. She had opened the door, and he walked in like he owned the foundation. And in that moment, I stopped being hurt. I started becoming dangerous. Because betrayal, when done this deliberately, leaves fingerprints. And I've spent my life learning how to read the blueprints beneath every facade. They may have thought I was out of the picture, but I was already planning the next build. And this time it wouldn't be a home, it would be a quiet collapse. While they were busy celebrating their little victory, I was collecting proof. I spent my evenings sifting through archived project files, cross-referencing my old designs with the ones Elliot's firm now flaunted on their site. It was almost laughable. He hadn't even changed some of the core layouts, just slapped on a different font and polished the renderings with flashier graphics. But I knew my work. Every line, every curve, every spatial decision had my fingerprint. I hadn't lost my wife. I'd been robbed of my mind's architecture. I called an intellectual property lawyer. Her name was Danica. She was sharp, younger than I expected, and had a calm voice that carried steel underneath. After I laid out everything, she leaned back and asked, "Do you want this to be public or powerful?" I told her I didn't need noise, I needed impact. I wanted them to feel it, not hear it. She smiled, and that's when I knew I had found the right weapon. Danica filed the first cease and desist within days. Elliot's firm ignored it, brushed it off like a mosquito bite. But that was step one. What they didn't know was that we were already preparing to challenge multiple builds, ones that had already broken ground. I wasn't after revenge, I was after leverage. And once we proved that the core schematics were stolen, every contractor, every investor, every client tied to those projects would be exposed to liability. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to a few key developers, people Elliot was trying to court with promises of sleek builds and efficient timelines. I didn't accuse anyone. I just asked questions, shared subtle hints about pending litigation, left them wondering whether signing with his firm might turn into a legal mess. No threats, just quiet facts. And quiet facts, when planted properly, bloom into doubt. My ex-wife posted pictures of some black-tie gala on social media, her in a shimmering dress, Elliot beside her with that smug, "I've won" look. I studied that photo like a blueprint. They looked happy, victorious. But I knew what was coming. I knew that beneath those expensive smiles was a fault line, and soon everything they stood on would begin to shift. I wasn't rebuilding to prove a point. I was rebuilding to reclaim what they tried to erase: my work, my reputation, and my peace. They thought I was just some quiet architect who'd crawl away in shame. What they didn't understand was that I build things. I don't beg for them, and when the foundation's mine, I always know where the cracks are hiding. The first sign that their world was starting to fracture came in a whisper. An email forwarded to me from a mutual acquaintance at a major design conference. One of Elliot's high-profile investors had pulled out suddenly, no explanation. Just a quiet withdrawal. When I read the message, I didn't smile, I just exhaled. It had begun. Not with fire, not with fury, but with absence. The kind of absence that sends a man like Elliot into a spiral he can't publicly admit. Danica followed with a second wave. Formal complaints filed with the Architectural Licensing Board, citing plagiarism and unethical practice. Each complaint meticulously documented, wrapped in evidence Elliot couldn't dismiss. And while he tried to juggle meetings, charm his clients, and keep the press at bay, I stayed invisible. I didn't call him. I didn't confront my ex. I just kept building behind the scenes, reinforcing the truth. while their empire buckled under the weight of stolen work. Soon, two of his largest clients backed out, both projects valued in the millions. I knew because those clients called me quietly, privately, not to gloat, but to ask if I was willing to consult. I said yes, but only after they agreed to one condition. Elliot's name could never be tied to anything I touched. No negotiation, no exceptions. The irony, they agreed without hesitation. His charm had expired the moment his credibility cracked. My ex-wife, from what I heard, started drinking more. She stopped showing up to work events. Some said she was spiraling. Others whispered she was angry at how cold Elliot had become. But what did she expect? Loyalty built on betrayal is like a house without a frame. It collapses the second the storm arrives, and the storm I sent didn't roar. It seeped in. Quiet, strategic, unstoppable. I passed Elliot once at a city networking event. He saw me across the room. I didn't wave, didn't approach, just nodded once, slowly, and walked past. His face, pale, tense. He looked like a man surrounded by walls he thought he'd built himself, now realizing they were paper-thin. That nod wasn't arrogance, it was closure. A silent message that said, I never needed to destroy you, you did it for me. Back at my office, I stood in the sunlit corner of my private studio, watching blueprints roll out across the table. My team was growing. My name was back in rooms they tried to lock me out of, and every project we signed carried one truth. No matter what they stole, they couldn't replicate the mind that created it. The real foundation was never theirs to begin with. By the time the licensing board's decision came in, the damage to Elliot's firm was beyond repair. His architectural license was suspended pending full investigation. Several projects were frozen mid-construction, and the whispers that once circled in backrooms had become full-blown industry warnings. Don't work with Elliot. His designs aren't even his. I didn't make a single statement. I didn't need to. His silence, once smug and superior, had turned into a hollow absence that echoed through every hallway he once walked with swagger. My ex-wife tried reaching out. She didn't call directly. She sent a message through my assistant of all people. She wants to talk, he said carefully. I told him, tell her I don't take meetings about the past. I had nothing left to give her. Not closure, not understanding. She had made her choice when she thought I was small. She misread my calm for weakness and thought Elliot's ambition would carry them both. But ambition without integrity isn't legacy. It's a collapse waiting to happen. I heard from mutual friends that she'd left the firm shortly after Elliot's license was suspended. Some said they split up. Some said she was trying to rebuild her image, start over. But here's the thing about starting over. You can only do it when you know where you went wrong. And people like her, they never look in the mirror long enough to see the cracks. Meanwhile, I had expanded. My new firm wasn't just thriving, it was attracting clients from the very markets Elliot used to dominate. Not because I was louder, not because I sought revenge, but because I built with substance, and the industry noticed, quietly, consistently, the way trust always grows, slow and deep-rooted. I didn't need to shout from the rooftops. I was the roof. One night, I walked through the old house, the one she left. I hadn't sold it. I kept it intact, not as a memory, but as a reminder. The bedroom where she once rehearsed her betrayal now held boxes of archived plans and signed contracts. The kitchen was clean. The silence was warm. I stood there for a long time, letting the past drift through like smoke, and then opened the back door to let it all out. Some people believe power is in control, in domination, in being the loudest voice in the room. But I've learned something different. Real power is in knowing who you are when everything familiar is stripped away. When the person you trusted turns away and you choose not to chase, but to rebuild, not to beg, but to rise. Quietly, strategically, completely. The cabin project was the last thing I needed to finish. One final build for a client who had trusted me with her dream retirement home in the mountains. It felt poetic somehow, returning to the stillness of nature after months of calculated war in the city. As I stepped onto the freshly laid deck and looked out at the valley below, I realized I wasn't carrying the betrayal anymore. I was carrying the blueprint of who I had become. My ex-wife no longer lingered in my thoughts, not with bitterness, not even with sadness. She had become a footnote in a chapter she thought she authored. Elliot. His name was rarely mentioned now. New firms had risen, new faces filled the space he once dominated, and me, I was still here, quiet, solid, unshaken. My story hadn't ended with heartbreak. It had only begun when I chose not to fight for someone who had already decided I was disposable. Freedom, I've learned, is not always loud. Sometimes it's sitting alone in a house that no longer echoes with the voice of someone who lied. Sometimes it's declining an apology you were once desperate to hear. Sometimes it's waking up before dawn, making coffee, and realizing that peace is the absence of pretending. I never got revenge. That was never the goal. What I got was justice, not the kind served in courtrooms or online gossip, but the kind that comes when you protect your name, your work, your soul. The kind that builds in silence and ends with a door that only opens to those who never tried to break you. People sometimes ask me if I ever miss her, if I miss who we were, and I tell them this. I miss the man I used to be when I didn't know better, but I don't miss who I became with her. The man who second-guessed himself, the man who tolerated being invisible. That man is gone, and the one who stands in his place is no longer waiting to be chosen. He builds his own table. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 45. I lost my wife, my plans, and what I thought was my future. But what I found in the ashes was something far more valuable. Myself, unshaken, unmatched, and finally unbound.